This is the Montreal website for City Hall. Now, just going to scroll over there, and you see here it says Montreal Charter of Rights and Responsibilities from official city portal. So I click on that link, the Montreal Charter of Rights and Responsibilities. So here it is, it opens up this link, it's the preamble, and it's the Montreal Charter of Rights and Responsibilities. Whereas a consensus was reached at the Montreal Summit 2002 in favor of a Montreal Charter of Rights and Responsibilities that would highlight values serving to unite and engage citizens as well as define their rights within the city. Whereas citizens enjoy the rights and freedoms proclaimed and guaranteed by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of December 10, 1948, and under international and inter-American human rights conventions ratified by Canada and to which Quebec has declared itself a party. Whereas citizens enjoy the fundamental rights under the Quebec Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms 1975 and by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So for those who have been watching my video, these covenants, these domestic laws and international laws, you should be familiar with by now, such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Also, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and the Declaration on Rights and Responsibilities of Individuals and Societies, the Canadian Constitution of Rights and Freedoms, and the Quebec Constitution of Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I've spoken about these in my past videos. Now within all these charters, international charters, covenants, articles of law, statutes, and regulations, if you will, you have two players, two subjects being expressed. You have a human being, a man or a woman, and you have a person or a citizen. And within all of this, there are rights and freedoms available for a human being, a man or a woman, and there are obligations and benefits available for the person or the citizen. It's the easiest way to look at it. Now, once you get an understanding concerning all this, such as everyone has the right to recognition as a person before the law, but not an obligation, and understanding what a person is, then the next step is to say, okay, how does this play out in my life domestically, where I live, with my municipality? Whether it be St. Hubert, Montreal, Chateauguay, Sherbrooke, Bromont, I don't know, I'm just naming a whole bunch. You understand, there's a whole bunch of municipalities everywhere in our provinces. So here in Quebec we have a whole bunch of little cities, little municipalities. In different provinces of Canada there's different cities, different municipalities. So you see, they made something in 2006 that was called the Montreal Charter of Rights and Responsibilities. And in it, it stated that Montreal and Quebec have an obligation to respect the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the international covenants that are in operation. And it clearly states it in this charter. It also states that Montreal and Quebec have an obligation, so if you're anywhere in Quebec, to respect the Charter, Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and the Quebec Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms. Obligation. Now what they did here in the Montreal Charter of Rights and Freedoms is they took out the laws, the international laws from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the international covenants, and they took out the laws that apply and they fixed them to apply to citizens. They used the fundamental operation of justice, removed your rights and freedoms as a man or a woman, the human being, and gave you limited benefits to the citizen through these covenants. However, this just goes to show you that Montreal and Quebec do indeed have an obligation to international articles of law and to domestic laws. So when you begin to understand that not only is there a citizen, a resident, or a person in operation and law as being one player, but there's also a man and a woman, a human being, who has different rights and freedoms from this citizen in operation and law. And you, the man and woman, the human being, can use these charters to initiate your freedom, to speak about your rights and freedoms as a human being and not as a citizen. As you see, there is an obligation to these international laws, these international covenants. And I personally live in Quebec, therefore I speak from more of a perspective of Quebec. But this applies, and if you back engineer this or back research this applies to all of Canada, these liberties. It applies to the United States of America, and in fact it applies to all Commonwealth nations. All Commonwealth nations. However, for me to go into each of your laws and point them out would take so much time. But the foundation that you get from what I'm sharing here gives you the ability to go into your own domestic laws and draw out the same codes that are equal to the international codes in order to produce your freedom and to have your rights and freedoms recognized wherever it is, whatever domestic state you are living under. But there is an obligation to all Commonwealth nations to follow these international covenants. So the question is now, do all these articles of law, do all these international and domestic charters actually apply on an individual level, actually apply on a domestic level with our municipalities? This is the website, the internet portal for the city of Chateauguay. The general powers of a municipality. A municipality generally has the same powers as a company, with several restrictions and differences in substance and in the manner in which it is entitled to contract, issue contracts, acquire or dispose of property. Examples: Article 28 in the law on cities and towns, and Article 4 in the law on municipal competencies. The Cities and Towns Act, Article 28. A municipality may have a seal, a legal seal, a recognition. The Municipal Competencies Act, Article 4. Ethics. The Code of Ethics and Conduct must set out the ethical values of the municipality, including the following values: the integrity of the members of every council of the municipality, the honor attached to the office of council member, prudence in pursuit of the public interest, the respect to be shown to the other council members, to the employees of the municipality, and to the citizens of the municipality, loyalty to the municipality, and the quest for equity. Notice that, the quest for equity. The values set out in the code must guide the council members in their understanding of the rules of conduct that apply to them. Chateauguay website, continuing on. What distinguishes a municipality from a company are the various powers that it has, including its ability to pass bylaws that have the force of law on the residents. Notice that sentence, the ability to pass bylaws that have the force of law on the residents. Its ability to enforce order and peace, to arrest and imprison individuals who break the law, and to pass judgment on these individuals. So here, when you see on the Chateauguay website concerning the municipality, the municipal internet portal, it says that the city is like a corporation or a company, and it is entitled to contract and to issue contracts. So they use the word, a city is like a corporation. And it says the residents and taxpayers are like shareholders of a company. They're saying it to you outrightwardly, but just putting a word in there to make a little distinction. And a lot of people teach, and this is the truth, that a corporation or a municipality is considered a corporation under law. Well, here Chateauguay is directly saying it. A city is considered like a company. Well, just remove the word like, and a city is a company under law. And the residents and taxpayers are shareholders of that company. Now, it states on their website that a city makes bylaws. And they give these bylaws, they give them the force of law, they give them on residents. Now notice this word so far. They use the word residents, that they create bylaws and they enforce them upon residents. And residents are like shareholders of the city, residents. Now, how come they didn't use the word individual here? How come they didn't say that a city can make bylaws, okay, and they give them force of law, and they pass them or push them on individuals? Right now, they made a distinction because a resident, as we know, is that legal person, the citizen, the one who has been incorporated into municipality. If you look in the Criminal Code of Canada, it states that a municipality, the inhabitants are incorporated into the city, incorporated into the company. Now here, the bylaws are forced or given force of law upon residents and not individuals. Because an individual can also be considered a human being or a man or a woman. Therefore, they cannot use that distinction, that title, that word here, individual. A resident of the city is automatically the legal person. You cannot be a resident in your natural state as a man or a woman. You are a resident as a legal person. So as you see, it states that the city has the ability to enforce order and peace, and to arrest and imprison, now notice the word they used, individuals. Individuals. Because an individual can include a human being, a man or a woman, or an artificial being. So the city has the ability to do all this to individuals who break the law. The law. A person, Canadian citizen, or a resident, if they break a bylaw, for example, no watering of your lawn because there's a water shortage, well, they can get a ticket. If they continue to do it, or they don't pay their fines, eventually they can go to jail. They'll go to jail, the resident or the person. Now the human, or the man or the woman, if they steal, for example, well then you can enforce the law upon them. You can also say that a resident or a person will steal. They'll do that in law, and then I'm trying to enforce the law on them. What I'm trying to show you here is that when they use the word, or when it's referring to the police, because police have more powers, they have powers under common law for men and women, such as don't kill, don't steal, don't do fraud. These are things that are expressed in common law. And then they have the authorities that are given to them by bylaws, that are by rules that have been given the force of law. So when they speak about policing and police powers, it comes out that they're speaking about individuals and not only residents. Because if they use the word residents only, it would apply specifically to persons and only to bylaws, acts, statutes, and regulations. But they use the word individuals, so it's inclusive. It will include the human, the man and the woman, and also the person. They're very tricky when they express their laws and the wordings that you use, and if you don't see what's happening, you'll go right by it. Like the article before that was just talking about, they talk about residents and taxpayers. They don't use individuals. Now when it refers to policing power, they use the word individuals. And this is why. Because when you understand, when you say the word individual, the qualification that you open up is either human being, man and woman, or artificial person, resident Canadian citizen. But if you use the word resident or person, you're talking about something that's been given certain rights, certain duties of a human being, that's been incorporated into a city, and is totally different from a human being. Chateauguay website, the mayor. The mayor is the head of the municipal administration and has the power to supervise and examine the entire administration. Cities and Towns Act, Article 52. The mayor shall exercise the right of superintendence, investigation, and control over all the departments and officers or employees of the municipality, and especially shall see that the revenue of the municipality is collected and expended according to law. A municipality has their own seal. They have their own seal. And the mayor is the head of the municipality. She's the top of the hierarchy for executive power. Now, when you look into how a municipality is incorporated, how it comes to be, they have a certain rules and regulations that they must follow. And if you will say, important code of ethics. And one of them is the fact that they must strive for equity. Equity. Now, if you notice, it just simply states that, and then goes on. They don't tell you what equity means. They don't tell you how it applies to you, and how to go about establishing this equity. Now, this is where it comes out through your rights and freedoms as a human being, or as a man and woman. Because it's your equity, your standing in equity, that has been played with. And that's going to be for part 2, because this was long enough for you guys to watch. I used Chateauguay as an example because they showed you the articles of law right there and they gave you a little description. I wonder if it's because of all the communications that I have spoken with them in the past few years, because I find this very interesting, the way they worded and phrased all this. Nevertheless, it's the same in most Commonwealth countries, or let me rephrase that, in all Commonwealth countries, because everyone that I've checked so far, and I've checked many, it's always been the same. Each town, village, and city has its own seal. It's considered a corporation, and your person has been incorporated into that city. Now, your rights and freedoms of the individual, whether as a person or a human being, is expressed. It's expressed in the municipal location. Meaning you have a municipal council, a city hall, a mayor with city councilmen. These individuals are under obligation to respect the domestic laws and charters and the international covenants and charters that give you your rights and freedoms as a human being. And that's why when they make domestic laws, you see the expressions, they change the wordings, such as residents, taxpayers, individuals, because without saying it outwardly, they're including or allowing for the expression of the human being, if you understand that that designation is there for you to operate under. The Montreal Charter of Rights and Responsibilities, it's for a citizen, the legal person. Although it teaches us that there is an obligation to Quebec and to Montreal and to the rest of Canada concerning the international covenants and the international laws and the domestic laws here that are expressed in Canada, in my next part of this video, we're going to talk about one of the economic social right that's been granted to the citizen in this covenant. Okay, we're going to speak about them, and I'm going to show you how these rights that they apply to a person, a citizen, is totally different than the rights that a human being has been given in these exact same covenants. So a human being, a man or a woman, has been given certain rights and freedoms in these covenants, alright? And a person, a citizen, has been given certain rights and freedoms from these covenants. And I'm going to show you what they did here. How they stripped us, the human being, of our economic social right through the person, through these covenants, by making this thing up here and giving it force of law upon the residents or the citizen. And after you see that, you're going to see why it's important to have a claim in equity, to take action. Because as you saw, a municipality, it's supposed to be concerned about equity. So, when you understand what's going on here, in the personal level, and how it affects you individually, you can make your claim. Black Laws, the 7th edition. Equity. Justice administered according to fairness, as contrasted with the strictly formulated rules of common law. It is based on a system of rules and principles which originated in England, as an alternative to harsh rules of common law, and which were based on what was fair in a particular situation. One sought relief under this system in courts of equity rather than in courts of law. The term equity denotes the spirit and habit of fairness, justness, and right dealing which would regulate the intercourse of men with men. And they don't mean sexual intercourse there, they mean the dealings, the relationships, the contractual obligations between men and men.